I basically said, hey, listen, I've been after you guys for 6 months. No one has even responded to me. I know I can help you. If you give me 15 minutes of your time and I don't provide any value, I'll stop contacting you. Woke up the next morning, email from him, and it said, hey, you've got your 15 minutes.
Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns Raw Stories Live from Las Vegas. I'm Simon Kouttis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kuehne.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And it's with great pleasure that we introduce you to Rush Williams. Rush, welcome to the show.
Thank you, appreciate it, guys.
By way of an introduction, you are Area Vice President at Impact.com.
Yep, exactly.
And today your story, we're going to talk about how you were able to prospect into Amazon and what eventually became a $15 million deal. So just take us to that moment, because you've just taken on a new role, you're failing in your patch, or you're not getting any traction in your patch. Tell us a little bit about the lay of the land at this moment.
Yeah, so just been promoted into a global account management role. I'd only been selling software for 3 years, so I felt like big role for me. My leaders saw something in me, which I really appreciated. They handed me Amazon, and I really was excited about it because most companies, Amazon is like one of their biggest accounts, if not the biggest. We were doing next to no business with these guys. So like 300K in annual spend, basically nothing. They handed it to me and said, hey, like, go figure out what you can do, right? So I'd kind of been at it for 6 months at this point. Not only had I closed no business, I had spoken to nobody, and I had not had a single meeting, right? So I was definitely like freaking out a little bit at that point. And yeah, just 3 years into selling, I was like, yeah, didn't really know what to do. So yeah, that's kind of where I was at.
Help us understand, you're at this point, your back's against the wall, you've got no contacts, you're in a really tough spot. What do you start to do, and how do you start to turn this situation around?
So how it turned around was actually a function of everything I did in that 6 months where it felt like nothing was happening. I'm really excited to share this story because those that know me and know how I sell, they will see like how kind of fundamental this is to how I think about selling. But basically when I got the account, I did my initial research, realized like, okay, I think there's probably 2 penetration points into this account, and really focused on one business unit in particular. Is like, hey, if we can get these guys, everything else will happen the way that it should. So first month or two, kind of went after him, got nothing, paused. And I think one of the things I've learned in my career that's really helped me is having a process is really useful in like the difficult moments, right? Because in that moment I was like, okay, it could be any number of things that's going wrong. My research is incorrect. The people that I'm reaching out to are the wrong people. My message is just completely off base and they don't care about it, right? So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board, look at my whole strategy again, realize very quickly like, okay, no, this is the right business unit. There's only 300 people in this business unit, so like these are the right people. So I was like, okay, maybe my messaging's a little bit off. Spent about a month at that point doing no prospecting and just learning from our product team, our marketing team, like what should we be saying about this kind of solution? Went back to the drawing board, tried that again. Still nothing. Went back to my process for a second time, realized like, I don't know what it is, but it's none of these things, right? I have the right business unit, I have the right people, I have the right message, there's just something missing, right? So my boss at the time, this guy named Josh Martin, he's now the CRO of this company called Mind Vision. They're about to get their Series A. He called me, and we had like a bunch of inside jokes at the time, but he was like, hey, I'm going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. He always called me when he's going through fast food, right? So he calls me, I'm like, all right, go kill it. And he says, we get in this back and forth, and he's like, hey, what's going on at Amazon? I was like, hey, Josh, listen, man, like, I don't know what's going on, but if these guys don't respond to me next week, I'm driving over to their house, and I'm gonna sit outside until they talk to me. And credit to him, right? Great guy. He's like, okay, well, listen, I love the passion. Please do not do that, let's kind of think creatively what we can kind of do here. So good leadership by him, I thought, right? Looking back now, like now that I'm a leader, it's really good leadership, right? And so he was like, well, hey, I just had a conversation with marketing. I've got some field marketing dollars. If I could give you like a couple grand, what would you go do with it? And I was like, well, actually, I got this really cool idea. At the time, their business unit was hidden. It was like stealth. So no one was supposed to know where they're at. They're in this like kind of area of Seattle that's not all that nice. It's kind of a little bit run down. I found out again, kind of through my prospecting, back to your question of the things I'd been doing, I knew where they were located, right? I talked to some other AE, gave me the info. So I knew that they hung out at this restaurant across the street. So I was like, hey, Josh, what if I rent this restaurant out? I'll set up an ANSYS day, right? And as they come in, I'll just force them to listen to what I have to say. He's like, brilliant, love it. Let's go do it, right? So get the whole thing set up, coordinate with the restaurant, get everything set up, and realize like, hey, I've got to blast this out to everybody in the organization, all 340 of them. So again, back to your question, what did I do? Well, I only had about half of the emails. So I had to go through, and like anybody who's worked with ANSYS or with Amazon knows their aliases are like weird. So I had to kind of test each alias in Mail Tester, build out my list of 340, built a calendar invite, added all 340 people to it, blasted it out, and like kind of, you know, went and worked out or something for the evening. Came back home, took a shower, etc., getting ready. And I get this email from Kimchi, okay? Kimchi is he was not only the guy running the business unit, he was a direct report to Bezos, but he was actually the brainchild of this thing. So the story goes that he pitched the idea to Jeff that, hey, we should deliver packages via drone. And Jeff was like, love it, go stand it up, right? Go figure it out. So sends me this email. And again, people that know Amazon know like there's this thing that Jeff used to do. And the email is just WTF ? Right? And this was like a thing that Jeff used to do. He would just send people, his lieutenants, like question mark, like what the hell is going on here, right? So that was kind of what the catalyst for all this was. And again, I think, you know, as I kind of told the rest of the story here, really all of the stuff that I did those 6 months of like learning the product, learning the messaging, having a process, going back to the process multiple times, messing around with these emails, going and talking to other companies and their AEs and them giving me the location of this building, like all of that was kind of the culmination of how it really like, you know, went where it went.
You had a hypothesis that you really believed in.
Yes.
How important is that belief, and how did you get to that point?
Yeah, as I continue the story here, you'll find that it becomes the thing that is really the key unlock. That hypothesis is really kind of the most critical thing you can do for any of your accounts. It's almost like, I think the way I would kind of describe how I go about doing it, and you're never gonna be able to give anybody a recipe because it's not, you know, like if we could give people a recipe, then AI would just be able to do our job. It's not that simple, right? But generally where I start with is just a maniacal focus on what is this business trying to achieve, right? And with Amazon, especially at that time, right, there was kind of this idea of they're just a package delivery company. Now they are so much more like, look at what we have here, right? And an understanding of like, well, what's the point of this? What's the point of their Kuiper satellite systems? What's the point of these drones? What is all of that about? And what are they really trying to do? That hypothesis was really kind of what, you know, led me to the promised land in this deal. And so getting there just starts with a maniacal focus on the business. And then at some point you have to try to, you know, tie that business thing to your technology in some differentiated way. That's where the sausage gets made, is in the middle there, but yeah.
So take us to that point of you've received this email, you've seen this question mark. What's going through your mind and what's your next steps from there?
So what's going through my mind is like, okay, what do I call Josh? That was my first thought, is like, should I call Josh, tell him what's going on? What should I do with this thing? They're obviously pissed, right? So
Was it aimed at you?
okay, so good point. So on the 2 line was me, and then one of the 2 people that I was really trying to get after, his director of engineering, so his lieutenant, so right 2 levels removed from Bezos, this guy named Russell Williams. So it just so happened, out of like a little bit of luck, right, that Russell and my name and our emails looked very similar, almost identical. So he sent that to me and just left me on by accident. So I was sitting there like, okay, what do I do? Russell made it a little bit easy for me because he responded immediately and he was like, hey, Russia's been very aggressive prospecting us for the last X number of months. Like basically something along the lines of, I don't know how he found out where our facility is, I'll handle it. And so for someone like me with my background, when I kind of read that, like, I'll handle it, I was like, nah, like I'm gonna handle you. Like I'm gonna take control of the situation. So again, it was one of those things where I kind of thought, okay, do I bring Josh in? What do I do here? And anybody who I think has done like a really big, and not even dollar amount big, but like important deal, there's these moments where you kind of have to like come to like, there's a raw emotion that kind of has to come through. So that's how I responded with. I basically said, hey, listen, like just see it from my perspective. I've been after you guys for 6 months. No one has even responded to me. Not even taken, like no one has responded to me. I know I can help you. If you give me 15 minutes of your time and I don't provide any value, I'll stop contacting you. I'm the global account manager. I'll stop contacting you. Like, what are your thoughts, right? That was it. Went to bed, didn't think anything of it. Woke up the next morning, email from him, and it said, hey, you've got your 15 minutes, right?
Wow. Right. So take us to that preparation for that 15 minutes, right? This is by far the most important 15 minutes of your life at that particular foray.
I felt like I was already prepared, right? Because I knew their business. I had done my kind of education on our solution, which at the time was a brand new solution for ANSYS too, as an autonomous system solution, which I've been out of that business for about 5 years, but I assume they're probably doing massive numbers with this thing. At the time, it was brand new. So I really kind of learned a lot about what can we do for people, like what's our differentiation, et cetera. So for the prep, I felt like I didn't really need to do a whole lot. I just kind of had to prepare some slides. But it was a similar thing of like, you know, do I bring Josh into this? Do I bring product into it? And I kind of went with the idea of like, hey, I got us here, like a little bit of luck involved, but I got us here. I'm going to take the meeting by myself and whatever happens, happens. And I'm going to own it one way or another. So yeah.
So how do you open up that first meeting and how are you feeling about stood in front of those two people? They're probably not, they're giving you their time because of the effort, right? But do they really want to be there? And you've got this probably imposter syndrome going on, but at the same time, you've got this hypothesis that you built and you've got the strength of the knowledge that, do you know what, I can solve a pain. But how do you enter that conversation? Because you don't have discovery. You've got 15 minutes. There is a point of probably going into a bit of features embedded. This is my hypothesis. This is what I believe I can solve for you. Or is it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, so compared to how I understand all of this stuff now,
yeah,
it was very amateur-ish in nature. But I think the thing that really came across, and I can remember, like these are one of these things where you vividly remember kind of what happened. I can vividly remember several moments where I was saying something and I was like, I'm saying the greatest thing this guy's ever heard. And I'm looking at him and he's just like sitting there blank faced. And I'm like, all right, yeah, this guy's not feeling it. But I think really, again, it was amateurish in nature, but I think really at the end of this, he was like, hey, listen, I really appreciate it. What I want to tell you is that what you're talking about here is more of like a computer vision approach to autonomous system development. We're doing a gaming, so like video game type, which by the way, they've moved off of that. But he was basically like, hey, listen, this is not going to be super useful to us. We've already, you know, kind of decided on this video game method. But who have you been trying to get in touch with? And I was like, well, obviously you. He's like, okay, who else? And I was like, this guy, Rick. He's like, okay, well, that explains a lot because Rick is actually no longer with the business. There's a new guy, Brad. I'm gonna introduce you to Brad and I want you to go have the conversation you just had with me with Brad. And I think there's something we can do here. So even though the entirety of what I pitched him in that meeting, he did not care about at all, there was something that I, you know, came across to him. I really think it was my conviction that I knew their business. I knew what they were working on. I knew everything about these guys, right? I knew the exact number of employees they had. I knew their location. I knew what they were working on. I knew that they just like, at the time they were working on some like B something or other, B41 prototype or something. And I asked him at one point, I was like, hey, did you go through 41 different prototypes? Is that what that is? He's like, yeah. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. But he was impressed with the fact I even knew B41, right? Like things like that. So I think he kind of saw, hey, there's something about this guy that he can probably help my business. And that came from the research, the conviction, et cetera.
So what's interesting about this story is that before you had that, you were kind of almost beaten up. There was a moment where there was real questions and real lows, but you kept on going through and you still managed to build that belief system. How has that experience shaped who you are as a seller today?
I have a very similar story from Sprinkler. I won't bore you with the details, but very similar thing. After this account for 8 months, nobody. All of a sudden one day, send a message, CIO responds. This initiative is on my desk right now, right? So it's not just like this time has been the only time. This idea of if you can truly understand their business and you can, tie that to some unique differentiator, you can't control a whole lot else, but you can control the way in which you do that. And I've just found that probabilistically, if you do that better than everybody else, the deals will happen.
Research into your account is one of the strengths and I suppose affirmations that you had at that point, which has served the purpose to drag you and continue to build on you and what you do today.
Rush, are you quite thick-skinned, or do you still feel those emotions even when you're not getting the traction?
Oh, for sure I do, yeah. So last year when I was leading a team at Sprinkler, we had a similar situation where for the first 9 months we closed nothing, then we closed $1 million deal, and then the last day of the year we closed like almost $3 million, right? So yeah, that's just the game, and especially like if you're going after these big accounts, the Amazons, the Fords, the name them, right? It's just gonna take time. And in some ways you can't control that time, but you can control kind of your preparation. But yeah, even last year I was like, you can ask my wife, like there's this joke my wife and I have where I'll go up to her and I'll be like, honey, this is dear, I missed my number, or like, we're not gonna get this deal. And she just looks at me and I'm like, no, I'm serious this time. She's like, I've heard this literally every single year for the past X number of years, right? So it affects me for sure.
What's the big takeaway for you? So someone that's listening, what did you learn from that experience?
So much. I think having the process was the biggest thing that stuck out to me of like, who's to say if this would have happened if I would have deviated and went and worked on a different business unit, or if I'd like gone a completely different direction with my messaging. So having the process to like come back and ground myself of like research, target, message, and then eventually develop. But are the research, the targets, and the messaging correct? And if they are, then probably there's just something creative you need to do that you haven't thought about, right? But having that kind of basis and then being willing to kind of be a little bit creative, I think were the two biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I think this is probably a point of why we're doing these stories, because we hear and we're sat in the classrooms, whether it's with enablement, whether it's with force management, drill down about all the theory, but it's the theory and the science combined with the artistry that is when real magic happens. And I think some of the most profound deals that we've seen and the biggest stories that have been kind of life-changing or impactful have all been ones which have had that artistry which has been applied to it, which has given them that extra edge and being able to get that deal over the line. So it's a great compound or a way of compounding this whole theory around artistry and meeting science, right?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the point where we actually reflect on that. I think, Ollie, you just gave a fantastic summary of that without even realizing, but actually I think it is truth. I think it's that combination of you've got such belief, you've got such conviction, all I need to do is get 15 minutes to prove that. But at the same time, the only thing that was getting it wasn't the process, it was just that creativity to give you that moment which changed everything. And then on the back of that, yes, there's highs and lows, but just being able to then refer back to that moment just gives you that belief to just go again and again and again. Rush, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me tell the story. And the happy ending was I ended up closing my first $1 million deal. The company ended up growing from 300K to 3 million while I had the account, and then up to 15 million afterwards. So yeah, very thankful that I had the opportunity. Thankful to my leaders, of course, who put me in the position. And then thanks to you guys for allowing me to share the story.
It's a truly inspirational story. And I think it's probably a great example, probably what PGAI can do. So who's one of our lead sponsors. But look, to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, please do subscribe to our various channels on iTunes, Spotify, and not LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. All the description, all the links will be in the description below. Thank you very much.